All right, folks, brace yourselves for the ultimate Piers Morgan debate showdown. In one corner, you have Democratic Congressman Dan Crenshaw of Texas. In the other corner, you have progressive journalist, debate powerhouse, and friend of the show, Mehdi Hasan, who proceeded to humiliate both Crenshaw and Morgan in a heated debate about Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and DOGE. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, and I definitely recommend that you go to Piers Morgan's channel and watch the full 120 minutes. The Crenshaw-Hasan debate lasts about 3/4 of it, and it's really, really good. We're going to start here with the opening statement of Mehdi Hasan. It's a banger.
I don't know. I haven't checked my spleen. It's not great. I think those of us who warned that Trump would be chaotic, Trump would be corrupt, Trump would be autocratic. I think even those of us who warned that for much of last year have been surprised by just how corrupt, chaotic, and autocratic he's been. I don't know if we're going to talk about what happened in New York on Sunday. That was pretty shocking with the detention and disappearance of a lawful permanent resident.
Yeah, we will later.
All the attacks on the press that you and I have discussed. You and I have discussed before the attacks on the press. This show is called Piers Uncensored. He's launched an open war on the media, on free speech, and of course the economy now. Again, I didn't predict that 2 months in, Trump himself would be refusing to rule out a recession. I knew he would harm the economy, but even Trump himself can't rule out a recession. So on multiple fronts, the economy, democracy, free press, it's pretty bad.
So we're going to play a bit of Crenshaw's response just to set the stage. Again, Crenshaw is, believe it or not, one of the smartest and best debaters in the Republican Party. But unfortunately, as I've often said, being the best MAGA Republican in the Republican conference is like being the world's smartest flat earther. When the facts are so squarely against you, it's hard to make a cognizable case, particularly against someone like Mehdi Hasan, who is so well-versed on the facts. But here you go. Here's a bit of Crenshaw.
Dan, your response to that?
Well, if you're going to accuse somebody of corruption, you might want to give a little bit more detail, right? Or a war on free speech. I mean, what does that mean? These are just words that actually do have legal meaning, but you don't have any legal arguments. So I don't know what you mean by corruption. There's really no evidence of that. War on free speech, there's just no evidence of that. There was evidence of it from the last administration, that's for sure. So look, this is Trump derangement syndrome all over again.
So that's what we're dealing with, Trump derangement syndrome. Okay, again, corruption is just it's also just a generic word as well. It's not just referring to like a particularly legal statute, although I would argue some of the cases against Donald Trump, those that were terminated because he won the election, and those for which he was successfully convicted, like the 34 felony counts, all related to corruption in one form or another. But also, this idea that Trump isn't waging a war on free speech, we've discussed it extensively on this channel. Donald Trump waging war against the Associated Press by limiting their White House access, his FCC surgically targeting media organizations that Trump has previously expressed dislike of, him threatening to punish or investigate media organizations he dislikes, his attempts to sue retired pollsters and various media networks into oblivion because of disagreements. Donald Trump is just objectively the most censorious president we've ever seen. So here is Mehdi's response to Dan Crenshaw.
So let me deal with a few things there, because Dan brought up a few things, and it's funny that Dan's saying words like corrupt have legal meaning. Of course, they don't. They also have a meaning that everyone understands, and he knows this because he and his party accused Joe Biden of corruption for years. Hold on. You had a long answer. No, I do mean corrupt.
Well,
no, you don't. No, you don't, because you accuse you and your party. You and your party accused Joe Biden of many crimes which you couldn't find any evidence of. You accused all sorts of things about Hunter Biden and corruption, which pale into insignificance with what the Trump family's been doing on the crypto
DOJ
front.
Did. There's actually a case against Hunter Biden. What are you talking about?
Piers just showed an intro.
I can give you
the convicted criminal sitting in the president. If you're going to start signing, now we like the DOJ.
Student loans.
Well, no, surely the point. Hang on.
President Biden attempting to forgive student loans is not an example of corruption. And again, Crenshaw doesn't even attempt to make that case. Corruption doesn't simply mean, Dan Crenshaw, policies that you simply disagree with. And Mehdi is trying to give examples and did give examples of Trump's corruption. He will do so further on in this debate as well. So again, just see how he moves the goalpost. No, corruption means, a specific legal case. Also, here's a case of an example of corruption against Joe Biden, which isn't exactly a legal case per se. So again, he's moving the goalpost because he's simply outmatched on the facts and on the standards. We're going to play another clip here in just a second. But yeah, again, this just goes to show what even the most intelligent, most gifted MAGA Republican debaters are reduced to by defending Donald Trump. So here is where Piers Morgan actually challenges Dan Crenshaw.
When you saw the scenes on the White House lawn there, did you feel entirely comfortable for the reasons that Mehdi said? You've got someone who donated hundreds of billions of dollars, obviously, to Trump. He pretty much helped get him elected. He's now in there as an unelected guy with enormous power, it seems, over this DOGE thing that he's doing, popular with some, unpopular with others. But turning it in, as he said, to a Tesla sale room, did you feel comfortable that the White House is being used like that?
I don't feel comfortable with it. I don't feel uncomfortable with it. Look, first of all,
again, total cowardice from Dan Crenshaw, right? Again, as Mehdi points out in this conversation, if President Biden had done this with a liberal donor, with George Soros or Mark Cuban, Dan Crenshaw and other Republicans would be rightly apoplectic and calling it corrupt and demanding accountability, but they have to bend the standard to favor Donald Trump. Now, Dan Crenshaw has the aesthetic and wants the aesthetic of not being a MAGA diehard, but as I've said before, there are basically two distinctions between Republican lawmakers. You have proud MAGA and you have shy MAGA, in the sense that they, even if they personally dislike Trump and think he's an authoritarian and a malignant narcissist, they recognize where the political advantage is, and so they will quietly bend the knee. And unfortunately, that's what Dan Crenshaw is doing here. So we've got another clip of Mehdi responding to Dan Crenshaw, and it's pretty brutal.
This keeps happening now. Dan says something and then you add something, so I can't deal with multiple things. I'm going to deal with Dan first. Dan says that this is all normal and we have precedent for it. Dan's being disingenuous. Elon Musk is running a government department. He is not vetted. He has not gone through Senate confirmation hearings like cabinet officials and ambassadors. George Soros has never led any kind of government department. If he did, Republican heads would explode. He's never run anything in government, nor is Alexander Soros. Musk is literally standing next to the president. He is telling cabinet secretaries what to do. He's attending cabinet meetings. They're going to court. Dan's not telling you this, but there's literal court cases going on right now to determine the status of Elon Musk and DOGE. And by the way, government lawyers are telling the judges he's not the head of DOGE. Donald Trump stood in front of Congress and said he is the head of DOGE. Maybe Dan can tell us today if Elon Musk, who hasn't been vetted by Congress, is the head of DOGE. What's so sad to see is members of Congress like Dan just completely abdicating their responsibilities as a co-equal branch of government and deferring to both Donald Trump and Elon Musk. That's kind of embarrassing to see. And I haven't finished my point. I didn't interrupt you. So when I finish, you can come back in. I know it's 2 against 1, so let me deal with Piers now. Piers, on DOGE itself. Yes, I have a problem. Well, we're both throwing stuff at me at the same time, so let me deal with them. Yeah, pull me. It's fine. I'm used to it. Piers is asking me about DOGE. Let me deal with DOGE. DOGE is a joke of an outfit, right? Do we all want to get rid of waste in government? Of course I do. I did a long monologue on my show about why we should deal with the Pentagon, which fails an audit every year and wastes billions and trillions of dollars, right? I want to deal with corporate welfare. I want to deal with people who, have conned the government. Of course we do. But that is not what DOGE is doing, right? DOGE is a joke, chaotic outfit. It claims to have found fraud, Piers, not just waste, fraud. And yet Dan gave me a lecture on precise terms. Fraud? Has anyone been charged with fraud? That's a crime. Elon Musk.
Again, brilliant point that others have pointed out, for which Dan Crenshaw has no response. If you're going to get hyper exact and make the claim that corrupt is a word that has a very specific legal meaning, and that's the only context in which you can use it. Fraud is even more so, and you're just objectively wrong because nobody has ever been charged, let alone convicted, with fraud as relates to DOGE. So again, Mehdi wins the argument. Dan is destined to lose it because Dan has hitched his wagon to Trump. But we'll continue.
Has found no fraud. Because if he had found fraud, people would be arrested or charged by the DOJ right now. We've seen no evidence of fraud. So that's been a lie from Musk. As for waste, you know this, Piers. You've talked about it on the show. $8 billion they claimed to have found. It was $8 million. They said they found $250 million of waste at the Social Security Administration. It was $500,000. They triple counted a $665 million contract. The Wall Street Journal, that lefty bastion, has found so many mistakes and exaggerations in what they found. They've been absolutely harming the US government. They got rid of people who were looking after nuclear weapons and then tried to hire them back. They got rid of people who were trying to fight Ebola and then tried to hire them back. They got rid of people who were trying to fight bird flu and then tried to hire them back. They fired veterans at the Department of Veterans Affairs who were manning the crisis line for veterans. Dan is a veteran, served the country, should be outraged. And then they tried to hire them back too. The whole thing is a disaster.
It is. Well said again. He's so good. Mehdi is one of the finest debaters, certainly in the liberal leftist progressive space, to be sure, because he has, almost like a photographic memory of the various facts at his disposal. Like, it's just really hard to remember all of the stupid, crazy, disingenuous bullshit that has come out from DOGE, especially when in the face of not just a Republican lawmaker, but also somebody like Piers, who has, openly indicated his support of DOGE as well. Here's another question, or rather another clip of Mehdi really making the case against DOGE to Dan Crenshaw.
Agenda. And as for DOGE being popular, the poll out today. As for the poll, hold on, you had your piece. Let me answer because Piers is rushing me on. The poll out today from CNN shows that the DOGE, Musk is super unpopular. He's more unpopular than Trump. He's more unpopular than Vance. This is not a popular agenda. And this is not what people voted for. People did not vote for the annexation of Canada. He didn't mention Canada on the election campaign trail. And they did not vote for cuts to Social Security and Medicare, which Musk on Fox Business said this week, that's the next big thing to eliminate. We're going to cut 600, 700 billion from Medicare and Social Security. No one voted for that. It'll be
Again, excellent point by Mehdi that in my analyses of the Piers Morgan Uncensored show, every time Doge and Elon Musk come up, I mean, Piers has been publicly angling for an interview with Elon Musk, which makes sense, and is part of the reason why he is grading Musk on a curve. But it's worth pointing out, Doge in reality is not popular. Doge in theory might be popular, but Doge in reality is led by Elon Musk. The data are overwhelmingly negatively predisposed towards Doge because they see it as clownish, buffoonish, and cutting essential services and being imprecise. And again, he's right that Elon Musk is wildly unpopular and increasingly so, and even hemorrhaging support among Republican voters. So when Piers, suggests that Elon Musk and DOGE are popular, the weight of the evidence is simply against him. But what's interesting is after Mehdi makes this point, Piers Morgan, for the first time, actually acknowledges that Elon Musk and DOGE are unpopular.
I would say, Dan, that would be slightly concerning me if I'm Donald Trump is that the poll approval numbers for what's going on with DOGE are falling quite quickly and significantly. And, Trump, he loves his polls. His own approval is taking a hit as well. At some stage, if those numbers continue to fall... He's the most
unpopular president for 70 years.
Well, if those numbers continue to fall, then Trump at some stage is going to stop it, isn't he?
Yeah, he very well might. And this is...
Again, so, he very well might. And again, I love the fact that Mehdi points out that Donald Trump's popularity is actually extremely low. Trump is more popular generally now than he was in his first term, but Donald Trump's first term is the least popular president in modern American history, and Trump is the second. Trump term 2 is the second least popular presidency in the history of the United States, or at least the very least since polling has become, a comprehensive part of American politics, beginning, in the Eisenhower-Truman era. Okay. So, Donald Trump is less popular at this point in his presidency than President Biden was, and President Obama was, and President Bush was, and President Clinton was. So this idea that he has some historic mandate or is overwhelmingly popular, or that his agenda is just simply not true. And I love the fact that Mehdi is so good that he's even forcing Piers to concede some of this. Here's another clip.
They can look
but
at
they can shut down. Hold on, they can shut down government departments that Congress created. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with that, Congressman? They want to shut, for example, Trump and Musk want to shut down the Department of Education. That's Congress. Well, they want to shut down the Department of Education. They are winding it down.
Right. Well, they can change a lot within the Department of Education. Legally, can they shut it down? That's been tried before. It doesn't work. Like, everybody can calm down. And if we want to talk about Department of Education, like, what is the Department of Education? It has about 6,000 or 4,000 employees. It's really just a pass-through for grants and student loans.
It's also really unpopular with the American people, this notion of getting rid of the Department of Education. Again, Crenshaw really has no response to this. Well, they're effectively destroying the agency. They are in practice destroying the agency, but they're not, technically deleting it the way that they've threatened to do. They've just effectively made it, inert, inoperable. Again, it's a difference without a distinction without a difference. Really weak point by Crenshaw. I want to play one last clip because we could keep going forever, and that's Mehdi roasting Piers Morgan.
No, I don't agree. And it's interesting you use the word unfortunate, Piers. I've told you this before in the past when you say you're not a conservative, you're not on the right. You use language that always minimizes what the right does. If Joe Biden had done it, if Kamala Harris had done it, you'd have been up in arms. It was a joke. You know it was a joke. The entire world watched that in shock. No president has ever behaved towards an allied leader in public like that, maybe in private. We know what our European allies thought of it. They thought it was a disaster. They didn't think it was just unfortunate. And look, if your argument is bring him to the table, there are other ways to bring him to the table.
That, of course, is when the topic turned to the very viral, contentious meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and Donald Trump. So, again, the whole conversation you should definitely watch. Mehdi is on fire here, per usual. And again, not defending Crenshaw here, just pointing out that Crenshaw is not Tommy Tuberville or Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is one of the smartest Republican lawmakers. But again, there's such an asymmetric performance. Mehdi is so clearly dominant here because the facts are so squarely on his side, to say nothing of his obvious skill as a debater. But this is what happens. You can be somebody like Dan Crenshaw, very smart, a very gifted debater, but when the facts are so squarely against you, when you're up against somebody like Mehdi, the deficits are very obvious. So masterful performance all the way around. Definitely watch the full thing. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.